Hi, my name is Harrison Franz,
And I'm Matt Bougie.
and we'll be talking about Chinese Americans. So, we'll start off just by saying that Chinese Americans and their culture, community, and diversity has changed and affected and still affects the U.S. today. They're one of the largest Asian communities in the United States.
And our book goes on to mention that the relationship between China and the United States dictates how Chinese Americans are treated here. If the relationship is good, they are a symbol of friendship. But if the relationship is bad, they are oppressed by the American people.
Chinese immigration and community development in the United States takes place in 5 different stages. We start with the open immigration for early Chinese laborers when they came here around 1850 for farming and the gold rush.
And many employers use them as strike breakers.
By the time of 1880, they accounted for 10% of the U.S. population. They were very cheap laborers, and when the stock market started to have problems in 1872, there weren't many jobs available, and many Americans began to racialize and discriminate because they wanted their jobs.
Which leads us into stage two, which started with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. And then during these 61 years against Chinese immigration, the Chinese American population was cut in half because a large number of Chinese males moved over here and not many females. And they had trouble finding wives because it was illegal for a Chinese man to marry a white woman. And in order to not step on anyone's toes, they switched their professions from strike breakers into more of a laundry style and restaurant style themed businesses.
These shops formed the base of Chinatowns. They were much quieter and secluded compared to how they are today. The community had cheap living areas and many labor opportunities that created an influx of population. This led to overcrowding, where they began to move out and form small Chinese suburbs or ethnoburbs. By the time of World War II, America opened its doors and allowed Chinese immigrants to come in and support them during the wartime.
And then shortly after this period, the Chinese government became communist. So the Chinese people who sent remittances back to their family were put under suspicion by the American people because they were seen as fueling a communist nation.
Stage 4 began with the Immigration Act of 1965, which was more open compared to the Exclusion Act, but still a selective process.
The goal of this act was to reunify families in the United States. What it did is it allowed for immediate family members to not be counted in visa totals, and 80% of the visas given were preferenced under extended family members for people who are already in the United States. During the 60s and 70s, there were 100,000 Chinese immigrants admitted into the United States, and this is quite a significant increase from previous numbers. Part 5 began with the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1990, which brought a lot of people with a higher education than previously into the United States.
Since more skilled workers are coming to the US, they tend to gain larger incomes as they are highly educated. This results in many Chinese being able to afford to migrate transnationally and form connections between China and the US. Transnational families typically are able to afford to leave America and start businesses back in China as well, but sometimes they may run into trouble getting high-paid jobs in China. These families may have to travel back and forth between the countries, and it often results in having to leave their children in America while they work out their business life back in China. With the current issue of the coronavirus infecting many of the world's population, many of the Chinese transnationals and even Chinese Americans are facing criticism since the virus originated in China.
And this proves the earlier point where our relationship with China affects how Chinese immigrants and Chinese Americans are affected today. For example, the San Francisco Chinatown is barren when it's normally full of tourists. And this is because people have fear of going to a Chinatown and that thinking that they will get the virus, which is completely unjustified and not true. But it demonstrates the point that our relationship with China affects how we treat Chinese Americans today.
Thank you for listening.